The Stellar Congress Chamber defied human architectural understanding. A massive spherical construct that seemed to defy physics, suspended in the void between star systems. Its walls were alive, quite literally. Bioluminescent membranes shifted with colors no human eye could fully comprehend, displaying real-time diplomatic data, historical records, and intricate neural networks of interstellar communication. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of this impossible space, her simple, graphene-weave suit a stark contrast to the bizarre organic and crystalline attire of the other delegates. Around her, representatives from over 287 known sentient species observed with a mixture of curiosity, disdain, and barely concealed contempt. Her quantum-encrypted earpiece hummed softly, a direct link to the most advanced diplomatic system humanity had ever developed. Dr. Marcus Chen's voice came through with crystal clarity, his words appearing as microtext along the inside of her retinal implant. Preliminary scans confirm heightened stress responses from the Korlath and Nexera delegations. They're expecting a traditional submissive approach. Elena's slight smile betrayed nothing. The chamber itself was a marvel of xenobiological engineering. Atmospheric modulators constantly adjusted pressure, temperature, and chemical composition to accommodate the wildly different physiological needs of the assembled species. Methane brothers stood mere meters from oxygen-dependent beings, all maintained in perfect environmental harmony through technology that made human environmental control look like primitive guesswork. To her left, the Korlath delegation towered, a collective of sentient crystalline entities that had dominated galactic diplomacy for over 3 millennia. Their primary representative, Grand Mediator Zarlok, was a massive structure of interlocking crystalline planes that shifted and realigned with each micro-movement. Traditional galactic protocol dictated that newer species, especially biological ones, should approach with deference, presenting themselves as grateful supplicants eager for guidance. Humanity had other plans. Representatives of the Stellar Congress, Elena began, her voice translated simultaneously into 3,742 distinct linguistic matrices. Earth presents its comprehensive proposal for interstellar collaboration. A holographic display erupted behind her, a 3-dimensional representation of human achievements that hung in the air like a challenge. Planetary terraforming projects, quantum communication networks, adaptive ecosystem restoration technologies. Each image was a carefully curated testament to human ingenuity. The Nexera diplomat, a massive tentacled being that represented the oldest continuous political entity in known space, began to secrete a nervous biochemical response. Its translucent tendrils flickered with micro-vibrations that indicated extreme agitation. Dr. Chen's voice returned in her ear. Linguistic analysis indicates maximum stress levels. The Nexera's communication glands are producing defensive pheromones. They're preparing for a traditional diplomatic shutdown. Elena knew the script by heart. Younger species were typically allowed limited speaking time, then politely but firmly redirected by the established powers. The Congress had maintained this system for millennia, managing galactic development like a carefully controlled experiment. But humanity was about to break the experiment. The Korlath Grand Mediator interrupted, its crystalline form producing a sound like shattering glass when it spoke. "Yum species," Zarlok proclaimed, the translation matrix rendering its words with a condescending tone. "Your proposals require significant refinement. Refinement. The most diplomatic way of saying, sit down and know your place." Elena's quantum-linked earpiece captured every microscopic change in the chamber's atmospheric composition. Stress levels were rising. Diplomatic pressure was building, and humanity was holding a match near this elaborate powder keg. "Refinement," she repeated, her voice carrying a tone that made several alien delegates unconsciously adjust their defensive postures, "is not what we're offering." In that moment, the entire chamber seemed to hold its breath. Millions of years of established galactic political tradition teetered on the edge of a knife. And Ambassador Elena Rodriguez was about to push. The holographic display behind Elena Rodriguez wasn't just a presentation. It was a weapon. Each image materialized with surgical precision, a visual assault that peeled back the layers of galactic technological complacency. The first projection showed the Lazarus Planetary Restoration Project, a terraform platform capable of resurrecting dead worlds in under a decade. Where other species saw impossible geological challenges, humans saw raw material waiting to be reimagined. Dr. Chen's voice filtered through her quantum-encrypted earpiece, providing real-time commentary. Watch the Nexara delegation. Their neural response patterns are fascinating. The first image dissolved, replaced by a quantum communication network schematic that made the Congress's most advanced communication systems look like prehistoric cave paintings. Intricate quantum entanglement nodes danced across the holographic display, showing instantaneous communication across distances that would take traditional methods millennia to traverse. Grand Mediator Zarlok of the Korlath delegation shifted, a movement that would have been imperceptible to human eyes, but which Elena's augmented vision tracked with perfect clarity. The crystalline being's molecular structure vibrated with what could only be described as professional anxiety. Impossible, muttered the Zornlek representative, a methane-breathing entity whose tentacular appendages trembled almost imperceptibly. No species develops such technologies this quickly. But humanity had. The next projection revealed something truly revolutionary. Adaptive warfare technologies that could reconfigure defensive systems in microseconds. A series of simulations played out, showing how human-developed quantum-adaptive shields could neutralize entire fleet configurations before their targeting systems could even complete a computational cycle. Each image was a carefully crafted message. Not a plea for acceptance, but a declaration of capability. The chamber's atmospheric modulators began to struggle, unable to regulate the rising tension. Diplomatic pheromones from a dozen different species began to intermingle, a chemical cocktail of fear, curiosity, and barely contained aggression. Preliminary data suggests complete cognitive disruption, Dr. Chen reported, his voice clinical yet tinged with a hint of satisfaction. The Congress's predictive models are failing in real time. Elena knew the true power wasn't in the technologies themselves, but in how they were being presented. This wasn't a typical diplomatic briefing. This was psychological warfare conducted through pure information. The Nexara representative, a being that had mediated galactic conflicts for over 17 millennia, began to secrete a defensive biochemical response. Its translucent tendrils flickered with micro-vibrations that indicated maximum stress levels. Children playing at galactic politics, Zarlok had proclaimed earlier. Now, the crystalline entity's molecular structure suggested something closer to professional terror. The final projection was perhaps the most devastating. A comprehensive overview of human adaptive biotechnology showed medical treatments that could resurrect organisms from near-cellular death, regenerative technologies that made the Congress's most advanced medical systems look like primitive bloodletting. "We're not seeking permission," Elena's voice cut through the chamber, each word translated across thousands of linguistic matrices. "We are offering a choice." The choice was clear: adapt or be left behind. Dr. Chen's final communication came through her earpiece. Stress levels had exceeded all predictive models. The Congress's internal communication networks are beginning to fragment. In that moment, Ambassador Elena Rodriguez understood that they had already won before the real negotiation had even begun. The holographic display continued to rotate, each image a silent challenge. Humanity wasn't asking to join the galactic community. They were redefining what that community could be. And the Stellar Congress was about to realize that their most fundamental assumptions were nothing more than outdated relics. Silence. Not the ordinary silence of a diplomatic pause, but a silence that seemed to consume the entire quantum-modulated atmosphere of the Stellar Congress chamber. A silence so profound that it made the fundamental molecular structures of the alien delegates vibrate with an almost painful resonance. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez moved with a calculated precision that defied the chaotic emotional landscape surrounding her. Her hands, encased in adaptive nano-weave gloves that could analyze molecular composition with a simple touch, began collecting the delegation's materials. Each movement was a statement. The holographic displays behind her continued to cycle through humanity's technological achievements, now operating on an autonomous loop that seemed to mock the frozen delegates. Quantum communication nodes pulsed. Planetary restoration simulations played out in miniature. Adaptive medical technologies danced in holographic representation. Dr. Marcus Chen's voice filtered through her quantum-encrypted earpiece. Atmospheric stress levels have exceeded all known diplomatic measurement parameters. The Congress's predictive models are in complete collapse. Elena knew precisely what was happening at a molecular level. The various alien species were experiencing something unprecedented, a total breakdown of their established diplomatic protocols. The Korlaf crystalline structures were vibrating at frequencies that suggested molecular panic. The Nexara's biochemical communication networks were firing in completely unpredictable patterns. Grand Mediator Xarlock, the massive crystalline entity that had dominated galactic diplomacy for millennia, seemed to be experiencing something close to computational shock. Its intricate molecular planes shifted and realigned in a pattern that suggested complete cognitive dissonance. "We're done here," Elena said, her words simultaneously translated into 3,742 distinct linguistic matrices. The translation was more than linguistic. It was a fundamental statement of intent. The chamber's advanced environmental systems began to react in unexpected ways. Diplomatic pheromone suppressors malfunctioned. Communication dampening fields flickered. For the first time in millennia, the carefully controlled environment of the Stellar Congress was experiencing total systemic unpredictability. Diplomatic aides from various species began to stir, their movement patterns suggesting confusion, fear, and something even more dangerous, a dawning realization. The Zornlek representative, a methane-breathing entity typically known for its extreme caution, leaned forward. Its sensory tendrils extended, capturing every microscopic detail of the human delegation's withdrawal. "This is unprecedented." The Zornlek's translation matrix rendered its communication. "No species has ever." Elena didn't wait to hear the rest. Her quantum-linked communication systems were already activating a series of pre-planned diplomatic protocols. Each movement, each second of this withdrawal, was being broadcast across thousands of communication networks. Not just to the established powers, but to the marginal species, the forgotten species, the ones who had been managed and controlled for millennia. Dr. Chen's final communication came through her earpiece. Initial data suggests complete systemic shock. The Congress's internal communication networks are fragmenting at an exponential rate. The holographic displays continued their relentless presentation of human capabilities. Planetary restoration, quantum communication, adaptive medical technologies, each image a silent challenge. Each simulation a quiet declaration of potential. Ambassador Rodriguez reached the chamber's exit, a massive quantum-modulated portal that could adjust its molecular structure to accommodate any known sentient form. She paused, just for a moment. Not a dramatic pause. Not a moment of triumph. A moment of cold, calculated assessment. The entire Stellar Congress chamber seemed to hold its collective breath. Millions of years of established diplomatic tradition teetered on the edge of complete systemic collapse. And humanity had just pushed it over. Deep beneath the Atacama Desert, in a facility that didn't officially exist, Dr. Marcus Chen watched the diplomatic proceedings unfold with the clinical detachment of a surgeon performing a precision operation. The facility, codenamed Prometheus, was a marvel of human engineering that would have made the Stellar Congress's most advanced research centers looked like children's science projects. Quantum computing systems that could process more information in a microsecond than most species could in a millennium lined the walls. Holographic displays tracked diplomatic, technological, and strategic data from across known space. "Initiate Protocol Rosetta," Chen murmured, his fingers dancing across a haptic interface that responded to the most minute neural impulses. Across the galaxy, a series of meticulously prepared plans began to activate. In the research laboratories of Europa's underwater cities, human scientists had been cultivating relationships with marginalized species for years. Not through traditional diplomatic channels, but through genuine scientific collaboration. Breakthrough medical treatments developed in secret. Adaptive terraforming technologies shared in whispers. Communication networks established outside the Congress's watchful eye. The Clara, a species of sentient marine organisms from the methane oceans of Titan, had been the first to truly understand humanity's approach. Where other species saw technological superiority, the Clara recognized a fundamental difference in philosophical approach. Dr. Aisha Nieder, the lead xenobiological researcher, had spent a decade building trust. Not through grand gestures, but through patient, incremental collaboration. A cure for a genetic disorder here. An adaptive ecosystem restoration technique there. Each interaction was a thread in a much larger tapestry. Diplomatic isolation is a weapon. Chen's eye assistant, area, calculated in real time, but not the weapon the Congress expects. The quantum communication networks humanity had developed were nothing like the Congress's rigid, controlled information systems. They were living, adaptive organisms. Communication channels that could reconfigure themselves instantaneously. Information pathways that could detect and route around potential censorship or interference. In the research stations orbiting the methane giants of the outer solar system, teams of human scientists were already preparing comprehensive technology transfer packages. Not weapons, not traditional trade agreements, but fundamental knowledge that could revolutionize entire species' technological and social structures. A complete database of adaptive medical treatments that could eliminate entire categories of genetic diseases. Quantum communication protocols that could connect isolated species. Terraforming techniques that could transform dead worlds into living ecosystems. The Congress believes diplomacy is a game of control, Chen muttered, watching the multiple holographic displays. We're playing an entirely different game. Area's holographic representation flickered. Probability of complete systemic disruption. 97.3%. Marginal species contact rates increasing exponentially. The preparation had been decades in the making. Not a sudden strategy, but a patient, incremental approach that had been building since humanity first made contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. Each technological breakthrough, each scientific collaboration, each seemingly minor interaction had been a carefully placed piece in a much larger strategic puzzle. The Clara Research Station received its first comprehensive technology package. Adaptive ecosystem restoration techniques that could transform their methane ocean worlds. Medical treatments that could eliminate genetic disorders that had plagued their species for millennia. No strings attached. No traditional diplomatic conditions. Just pure, unrestricted knowledge. Initiating secondary communication protocols, Chen said, his voice calm. Across the galaxy, thousands of communication nodes, carefully developed over decades, began to pulse with information. Not military intelligence. Not traditional diplomatic communiques, but something far more dangerous. Pure, unfiltered potential. The Stellar Congress had always managed galactic development like a carefully controlled experiment. Humanity was about to show them the difference between management and true collaboration. And the experiment was about to get very interesting. The first cracks appeared in the most unexpected places. Captain Zarek of the Zornlek merchant vessel Horizon's Promise stared at the communication terminal, her methane-filtering sensory tendrils quivering with a mixture of disbelief and hope. The data package from Earth was unlike anything she had ever encountered in her 2 centuries of interstellar trade. Complete. Unrestricted. No political strings. The technological transfer protocols buried within the communication were revolutionary. Adaptive ecosystem restoration techniques that could transform the dying methane worlds of the Zornlek homeworld. Medical treatments that could eliminate genetic disorders that had plagued their species for millennia. Communication technologies that could connect isolated Zornlek colonies in ways they had never imagined possible. Transmission confirmed. Her ship's Quantum A reported, its translation matrix capturing the subtle nuances of her species' complex biochemical communication. No traditional trade restrictions detected. Full knowledge transfer initiated. In the communication centers of 100 marginalized species, similar scenes were playing out. The Clara marine researchers received comprehensive adaptive terraforming techniques that could restore their rapidly deteriorating ocean ecosystems. The Rentai, a silicon-based species trapped on dying worlds, discovered medical nanotechnology that could stabilize their molecular structures. No demands. No traditional diplomatic negotiations. Just pure, unrestricted knowledge. Dr. Marcus Chen watched the cascading communications from the Prometheus facility, his quantum computing systems tracking every microscopic interaction. Area, his eye assistant, generated real-time probability models that made the Stellar Congress's most advanced predictive systems look like children's guessing games. Communication spread is exponential, Area reported. Traditional diplomatic suppression protocols are failing at a rate of 0.03 microseconds per global communication node. What the Stellar Congress failed to understand was the fundamental difference in humanity's approach. This wasn't about control. This was about genuine collaboration. The first official response came from an unexpected source. The Rentai Collective, a species that had been effectively locked out of meaningful galactic development for centuries, broadcast a message that would be remembered as a turning point. Humanity offers what the Congress never could, the transmission read, translated across thousands of linguistic matrices, genuine partnership. Captain Zarek of the Zornlek vessel made her decision. She opened a direct communication channel to the nearest human diplomatic outpost. No intermediaries. No traditional protocols. Direct contact. In the vast communication networks that crisscrossed known space, something unprecedented was happening. The carefully managed information flows of the Stellar Congress were being bypassed. Marginal species were discovering they had options. Real options. Dr. Chen watched the holographic displays with a calm that would have unnerved the alien delegates who had dismissed humanity mere days ago. Each communication node was a potential revolution. Each transferred technology package a blow to the Congress's carefully maintained control structures. The experiment begins, he murmured. Area's holographic representation flickered. Probability of complete systemic disruption, 98.7% and rising. The Stellar Congress had always managed galactic development like a carefully controlled experiment. Humanity was about to show them the difference between management and true collaboration. And the experiment was about to get very interesting. Across 100 worlds, 100 species began to look at the galaxy, and their place in it, with new eyes. The rigid structures that had defined interstellar politics for millennia were crumbling. Not through violence. Not through conquest. But through the most dangerous weapon humanity possessed. Pure, unfiltered potential. The technological revelations came like a quantum wave, washing away millennia of established galactic understanding. Dr. Alina Volkov, lead researcher at the Quantum Adaptive Systems Laboratory, stood before a holographic display that would have made the Stellar Congress's most advanced scientists weep. The full communication network they had developed wasn't just a technological breakthrough. It was a fundamental reimagining of information transfer. Quantum entanglement nodes pulsed with a living complexity that defied traditional computational models. Each node was more than a communication point. It was an adaptive, self-configuring intelligence that could route information through paths that didn't even exist moments before. Initiate full-spectrum transmission, Volkov commanded. The first wave of technological packages began to propagate across the galaxy. Faster-than-light communication systems that made the Congress's networks look like smoke signals transmitted instantaneously. Where previous galactic communication relied on massive relay stations and years-long transmission times, humanity's system could transfer entire planetary databases in microseconds. The adaptive terraforming technologies were even more revolutionary. A single platform could transform a dead world into a living ecosystem in less than a decade. Planetary restoration wasn't just a possibility, it was now a practical reality. On the research station orbiting Europa, Dr. Marcus Chen watched the initial transmission data with a clinical detachment that bordered on the surgical. Area, his quantum eye assistant, generated probability models that danced across holographic displays. Transmission efficiency, 99.997%. Area reported. 0 detected interference attempts. The defense systems were perhaps the most shocking revelation. Adaptive quantum shields that could neutralize planet-killer weapons as easily as swatting an insect. Defensive technologies that didn't just protect, they learned, adapted, evolved in real time. The Clara Marine Research Team was the first to fully comprehend the scale of the technological transfer. Their lead scientist, Dr. Kira Lun, spent 3 continuous cycles analyzing a single adaptive medical technology package. This isn't just a treatment. She broadcasted to her collective, this is a complete reimagining of biological potential. The medical technologies were perhaps the most profound. Regenerative systems that could resurrect organisms from near-cellular death. Genetic repair technologies that could eliminate entire categories of genetic disorders. Adaptive nanomedicine that could reconfigure biological systems in real time. Each technological package was a silent declaration, not a weapon, not a tool of conquest, but a fundamental expansion of what was possible. The Zornlek merchant vessels were the first to fully comprehend the economic implications. These weren't just technologies to be traded. These were complete paradigm shifts that could transform entire species' developmental trajectories. Captain Zarak of the merchant vessel Horizon's Promise realized something fundamental. This wasn't a traditional technology transfer. This was a complete redesign of galactic potential. Dr. Volkov's quantum communication nodes continued to pulse. Each transmission was carefully designed. No traditional diplomatic strings. No economic constraints. Just pure, unrestricted potential. The first wave is complete, she murmured to herself. Area's holographic representation flickered. Predictive models suggest complete systemic transformation within 72 standard galactic cycles. The Stellar Congress had always managed galactic development like a carefully controlled experiment. Humanity was about to show them the difference between management and true collaboration. And the experiment was about to get very interesting. Across 100 worlds, 100 species began to look at the galaxy, and their place in it, with new eyes. The rigid technological structures that had defined interstellar development for millennia were crumbling. Not through violence. Not through conquest. But through the most dangerous weapon humanity possessed. Pure, unfiltered potential. The Stellar Congress's political structure began to disintegrate like a sandcastle struck by a quantum wave. In the communication centers of 1,000 worlds, the first tremors of change rippled through millennia-old power structures. Species that had been docile for generations suddenly discovered they had options. Real, tangible alternatives to the carefully managed existence the Congress had maintained. The Nexara Communication Hub, a massive biotechnological network that had controlled interstellar information flow for 17 millennia, began to fragment in ways its creators could never have anticipated. Quantum communication nodes developed by humans slipped through its defenses like water through a rusted sieve. Ambassador Kreltax of the Rentai Collective, A species that had been effectively quarantined by the Congress for centuries received the first comprehensive technological transfer package. As the adaptive data streams filtered through their silicon-based neural networks, something extraordinary happened. Hope. Pure, unfiltered hope. The technological packages weren't just information. They were a complete reimagining of potential. Terraforming techniques that could restore their dying worlds. Medical technologies that could stabilize their rapidly degrading molecular structures. Communication systems that could connect their isolated colonies in ways they had never imagined possible. Dr. Marcus Chen watched from the Prometheus facility, his quantum computing systems tracking the cascading effects with clinical precision. Area, his eye assistant, generated probability models that danced across holographic displays like living mathematics. Political structure integrity, 12.4% and falling. Area reported its holographic representation flickering with something almost like excitement. The Clara Marine researchers were among the first to fully comprehend the scale of the transformation. Where they had once been restricted to their methane ocean worlds, they now saw pathways to entire planetary ecosystems. Adaptive technologies that could transform their entire species' trajectory of development. On 100 worlds, 100 species began to look at the galaxy, and their place in it, with new eyes. The Congress's control had always been based on three fundamental principles: information control, technological restriction, and economic management. Humanity had just invalidated all three in a single strategic move. Captain Zarak of the Zornlek merchant vessel Horizon's Promise understood first. This wasn't just a technological transfer. This was a complete redesign of galactic potential. Her communication to the Zornlek Collective was simple and profound. We are no longer asking for permission. The first direct challenges to the Congress's authority came from the most unexpected sources. The Rentai began openly developing technologies that had been forbidden for millennia. The Clara started terraforming projects that directly challenged the Congress's planetary development protocols. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched from her diplomatic isolation facility, a slight smile playing across her lips. The walk out from the diplomatic discussions was looking less like a diplomatic incident and more like the first move in a much larger game. The experiment begins, she murmured. Area's predictive models suggested complete systemic transformation within 72 standard galactic cycles. But both Chen and Rodriguez knew the real transformation would happen much faster. The Stellar Congress had always managed galactic development like a carefully controlled experiment. Humanity was about to show them the difference between management and true collaboration. The rigid political structures that had defined interstellar relationships for millennia were crumbling. Not through violence. Not through conquest. But through the most dangerous weapon humanity possessed. Pure, unfiltered potential. Across communication networks that spanned thousands of light years, a simple message began to propagate. Not an official declaration. Not a formal diplomatic communication. Just a statement of fundamental possibility. We choose differently. The final act unfolded not with a bang, but with a quantum whisper that reverberated across thousands of light years. In the central chamber of the Stellar Congress, Grand Mediator Zarlok of the Korlath, the crystalline entity that had dominated galactic diplomacy for millennia, experienced something unprecedented. Shock. True, fundamental shock that resonated through its molecular structure like a fatal fracture. The Congress had always been a machine of control, a carefully calibrated system that managed the development of hundreds of species with the precision of a quantum algorithm. Humanity had just rewritten the entire equation. Dr. Marcus Chen watched from the Prometheus facility, his quantum computing systems tracking the cascading effects with a clinical detachment that bordered on the surgical. Area, his eye assistant, generated probability models that danced across holographic displays like living mathematics. Systemic transformation complete, Area reported. Probability of return to previous political structure, 0.003%. The transformation wasn't violent. It wasn't a conquest. It was something far more dangerous. It was a fundamental reimagining of potential. The technological and communication packages humanity had distributed weren't just tools. They were keys. Keys that unlocked potential that had been carefully suppressed for millennia. Species that had been confined to single planetary systems now saw pathways to entire galactic ecosystems. Marginal cultures that had been managed and controlled now discovered they could choose their own trajectory. Captain Zarak of the Zornlek merchant vessel Horizon's Promise understood first. This wasn't just a technological transfer. This was a complete redesign of galactic possibility. Her communication to the emerging network of liberated species was simple and profound. We are writing a new story. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez, watching from her diplomatic isolation facility, allowed herself the slightest smile. The walkout from the initial diplomatic discussions was now revealed as the first movement in a much larger symphony. The Clara marine researchers were transforming their methane ocean worlds. The Rente were stabilizing their silicon-based molecular structures. Species that had been effectively quarantined were now developing technologies that would have been unimaginable mere cycles ago. The Stellar Congress realized, far too late, that they had been playing an old game while humanity was inventing an entirely new one. "We are not seeking permission," Rodriguez had said during the initial discussions. Now, that statement resonated across the galaxy like a fundamental truth. Dr. Elena Volkov, from the Quantum Adaptive Systems Laboratory, understood the deeper implications. This wasn't just a technological revolution. This was a philosophical transformation. A fundamental reimagining of what was possible when species were given the opportunity to develop without artificial constraints. Aria's predictive models suggested complete galactic restructuring within 72 standard cycles. But Chen and Rodriguez knew the real transformation would happen much faster. The rigid structures that had defined interstellar relationships for millennia were dissolving. Not through violence. Not through conquest. But through the most powerful force in the universe. Potential. Across communication networks that spanned thousands of light years, a new narrative began to emerge. Not an official declaration. Not a formal diplomatic communication. Just a statement of fundamental possibility. We choose differently. In the quiet of her private quarters, Ambassador Elena Rodriguez looked out at the star-filled void. The first movement was complete. The real performance was just about to begin. The galaxy would never be the same.